you want something done, then do it yourself. Just take your up and atom down off the shelf. Put your muzzle to the grindstone and do it yourself. If you want something done, hop it up, hop it up, hop it up. You've got to do it yourself.
So yeah, my apologies to everyone. That Zulu video took months to make and kept getting pushed back, and I'm sorry. But now, Jareeve's back and ready to cover some more chunky goodiness. 2012. The 85th ceremony was hosted by comedian Seth MacFarlane, and man was it not a good show. To put it briefly, his jokes are either dumb or awkwardly rough. It's probably the worst host I've personally seen outside of Hathaway and Franco a few years before. The big winner for 2012 was Ben Affleck's ARGO, which took home picture, adapted screenplay, and film editing. This year was full of big films getting many nominations, but for the sake of time, the only one I'll mention is Steven Spielberg's Lincoln with 2 wins out of 12 nominations. Other awards include Ang Lee's second Best Director win, this time for Life of Pi, Daniel Day-Lewis's third Best Actor win for Lincoln, Jennifer Lawrence unfortunately won Best Actress for David O. Russell's Silver Linings Playbook, Christoph Waltz won his second Oscar for Supporting Actor for Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained, and Anne Hathaway secured her first Oscar for Supporting Actress for her limited role in Tom Hooper's film adaptation of the stage musical, Les Miserables. Some notable films from 2012 include The Grey, Chronicle, The Woman in Black, The Secret World of Arrietty, John Carter, Jiro Dreams of Sushi, 21 Jump Street, The Cabin in the Woods, The Three Stooges, Marvel's The Avengers, Dark Shadows, Men in Black 3, Madagascar 3, Rock of Ages, Brave, Magic Mike, Ted, The Amazing Spider-Man, Ice Age 4, The Dark Knight Rises, Ruby Sparks, The Campaign, The Bourne Legacy, The Oogie Loves and the Big Balloon Adventure, End of Watch, Looper, Skyfall, Cloud Atlas, Twilight Breaking Wind Part 2, The Hobbit and Unexpected Journey, and The Impossible. 2012 also had 3 films I absolutely hate. The first is a bland adaptation of the American ripoff of Battle Royale called The Hunger Games. The second is an annoying film by the name of Pitch Perfect. And the third, and most hated of them all, Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. Ugh. 2012 has a lot of good movies, but good grief did it include some movies I absolutely despise. Anyway, let's get to the nominees. I would be lying if I said the first nominee didn't put me to sleep the first time. The slow, deliberate pace of the film made it something that required a lot, and I mean a whole lot, of attention. When I watched Michelle Haneke's AMOUR the first time, it was the middle of the night. Now I see a lot of films late into the night and rarely have trouble staying awake. Unfortunately, the combination of slow-moving story and lack of sleep resulted in, well, sleep. But giving this film a second watch for this video has made me wish I didn't snooze before. AMOUR is probably the most realistic and uncomfortable look at old age ever captured on film. The story looks at an elderly couple and the slow process of the inevitable when the wife has a stroke. Every second of this 2-hour movie pulls you into the small claustrophobic world these characters live in. Haneke's decision to not leave the apartment for the majority of the film was brilliant, and by the end I felt like I had lived in this flat my whole life. And when I said this film was uncomfortable, man, oh man, is it uncomfortable. It's a warts and all movie that shows you just how painful aging is and the suffering everyone encounters when at death's door. One detail I really appreciated was seeing Georges's aging process as well as Anne's. The focus is on Anne and her condition, but what Haneke does is also show how this has physically affected Georges. Looking at the beginning of the film and comparing it with the end, clearly both of them aged dramatically. Emmanuelle Riva's performance as Anne was well worth her nomination for Best Actress, and she should have won. The way she showed Anne's decreasing health was a feat of acting, and the physical aspects of her performance made me wonder just how difficult it must have been to achieve. The rest of the small cast is also great, and I really can't find any big problems with this film. I applaud everyone who worked on AMOUR, and I can't think of any reason to not experience this film at least once. It may be slow, but as many of us know, if you snooze, you lose. And boy, did I miss out on my first viewing. Therefore, AMOUR receives a perfect 10 out of 10 score.
Mais tu fais quoi? Tu avais laissé l'eau couler.
Dis donc, qu'est-ce qui t'arrive? Tu es complètement folle? C'est une blague?
Pardon?
C'est une plaisanterie ou... Ça se veut une plaisanterie ou quoi?
Quelle plaisanterie? Je ne comprends rien. Sur quel ton tu me parles? Qu'est-ce qui te prend?
Écoute, arrête ce jeu. C'est pas drôle.
Mais quel jeu, bon Dieu? Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
The next film is a film that came out of nowhere in the 2012 Best Picture race. Directed by Ben Zeitlin, Beasts of the Southern Wild is a unique film about a young girl named Hush Puppy that lives in a bayou community that tries to deal with rising water levels, and also her father's ailing health. This was the final film watch for this year's nominees because I honestly had forgotten all about it. And let me tell you, it's actually a pretty interesting watch. While it is pretty slow moving, the film presents a small community of people that live in these little shacks in a bayou. It's a world that many people have never seen and probably one many people didn't even know existed. The characters aren't the most memorable, but do provide a nice little touch to the overall atmosphere of the film. And Quvenzhané Wallis is the film. She is the main character, but she also does a great job carrying the story and connecting the audience to the unique world she lives in. I applaud Miss Wallis's performance because it really is a feat of acting, and she was appropriately nominated for this film. On the negative side, this film doesn't leave much for the viewer to digest at the end. Maybe for some of you this isn't true at all, but I remember the film just ends and you're not left with much. There's an emptiness to the film that is appropriate, but it also hurts the film because you don't quite connect to the heart of the story. Hush Puppy and her father's relationship being the central part of the story. And again, maybe some of you did find this connection. I unfortunately did not quite get into it. But overall, Beasts of the Southern Wild is a nice little film that does try to portray a unique and interesting world to the viewer. A solid 7 out of 10.
Come here, Hush Puppy. Come see my Uncle John here. Let me show you how to do it. Here, baby. Don't be scared of it now. Now turn it upside down. There you go. Now, push it with your thumb. Good girl. That's it. And then real careful. Take your knife and you pop this off. That's beautiful.
Quentin Tarantino is a big favorite for film lovers. From his fantastic debut with Reservoir Dogs, to his magnum opus Pulp Fiction, to Jackie Brown, Kill Bill, and his Best Picture nominee Inglourious Basterds, which I covered for the 2009 video. Following his success, Tarantino turned to a genre he loves, westerns. In 2012, not 2013 as I accidentally said in a previous video, the director made what many consider his greatest film, Django Unchained, starring Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, and Leonardo DiCaprio. I remember there was a lot of hype for this film in the months leading up to it, and a lot of people love it. I don't. While it is solid filmmaking with some nice performances from Waltz and DiCaprio, I don't think it's anywhere near the praise it gets. Sure, it's a fairly entertaining film and does try hard to be its own thing, but man, is there something missing. And in the end, I think it stems from Jamie Foxx. His acting is fine, but I never really connected with the character. There's plenty of sympathy for his predicament, and you do want him to reunite with his wife, but while the film went on, I found myself drawn to the other characters. Christoph Waltz is the highlight of the first half, although I don't think he necessarily deserved the Oscar since he's playing a similar character to his Inglourious Basterds self. Personally, I think DiCaprio is the best of the bunch, even if he's just playing a louder, southern version of himself. Sorry for the spoilers, but when both Waltz and DiCaprio are out of the picture, the film suffers. There isn't a big character to latch on to, and the titular character isn't strong enough to carry the story. And boy, does the film keep going, and going, and going. Django could have been a bit shorter and still been good. Why did the ending need to be this drawn out? And while he isn't a bad actor at all, Tarantino's small role as an Aussie is bad. And I mean bad. He tries putting on the accent and it does not sound convincing at all. A little issue, but it is pretty distracting, especially when the film is technically in the final act. I guess most of the problems with Django Unchained come from a weak central character and a story that is too stretched out. I did enjoy it, and I still think it's worth watching, I just don't think it's anywhere near as good as people say. Personally, I think Tarantino's next film, The Hateful Eight, is much better and much more entertaining. 7 out of 10.
His old Ben.
Hey! Now lay your palms flat on that tabletop. If you lift those palms off that turtle shell tabletop, Mr. Pooch is gonna let loose with both barrels that sawed off. There have been a lot of lies said around this dinner table here tonight, but that you can believe. Mr. Moody, would you be so kind as to collect the pistol hanging off these boys' hips here? Thank you ever so much.
Doctor? Where were we?
When looking at various Broadway musicals, there are a surprising number of shows that are sung through. Of course, this means that the entire musical consists of songs that progress the plot without any use of spoken dialogue. One simple example is Andrew Lloyd Webber's Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Like many of his shows, Webber's biblical show is all song and dance, which moves at a fast pace and has many different styles of music. I personally played in the community orchestra for this show, and let me tell you, it flies by. And why is that, you may ask? Because it's only 90 minutes or so without the intermission. That's why it works to be sung through. It's quick and to the point. But what about a show like, Les Mis? Now here is an interesting show. It's much longer than 90 minutes, just look at the source material, and it doesn't show off various styles of music. Instead, it features a reoccurring phrase that gets repeated by many different characters in many different scenes in many different times throughout the play. And while it isn't quick to the point like Joseph, it is powerful. It is meant to be on the stage, and on the stage is where it should remain. Oh, how I wish someone would have said this to Tom Hooper, our old friend who directed 2010's The King's Speech. Coming off his Oscar wins, Hooper thought the idea of adapting the Tony-winning 1987 musical into a film would be a surefire hit and have a chance with the Academy. Oh, good grief is this bait. Before I delve any deeper, I will say that I do not hate or even dislike this film. It has many great scenes and can be pretty powerful at times. I'd be lying if I say I don't occasionally flip on one of the songs and sing along. Of course, not any of the Russell Crowe solos, but we'll get to that in a minute. This is an example of a stage musical that should have stayed on the stage. Back in the 2002 video, I talked about how Chicago was not necessary to be on film as it was just a film stage play. For Les Mis, I can say that there are many things in the film that would make it worth being adapted. The sets and costumes and makeup are all well done, and there's some depth added to the settings. The problem? The film is sung through. Now this wouldn't be too much of a problem if it didn't weigh everything down. There are times that the singing became funny to listen to, not only for Hooper's decision of live singing on camera, but for the way that ordinary dialogue becomes this weird mix of notes just to say one stupid line. And it gets worse as the movie goes on. When it's a big song number, the singing is perfectly fine. It's easy to see that this is where the singing for dialogue works. But when it's just a little transition scene or a simple conversation, man, does it really feel dumb. And with a running time over 2.5 hours, it feels like forever. Whenever someone spoke without singing, which happened a few times, I let out a sigh of relief. And boy, does some of that live singing not sound good. One big example is the duet between Amanda Seyfried, however you say that, and Eddie Redmayne. Some of the notes don't quite sound right, which some might argue gives it grit. But it only makes me laugh because of how awkward both of them sound. And it's in that higher octave, so the bad notes are pretty clear. And yes, Russell Crowe isn't the greatest singer. Now, if you've seen or heard some of his own music, it makes sense because of the style he sings to. But here, in a Broadway musical film adaptation, it's not good. He sounds like he smoked for 50 years, and it could get a bit cringy at times. Of course, this isn't Pierce Brosnan Mamma Mia levels of bad, so I guess Crowe isn't that bad. He is a good fit for this role and does have a screen presence. It just gets ruined whenever he opens his mouth. Getting back to the constant singing. It can work in a film. Jacques Demy's 1964 musical, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, is a perfect example of having a good sung-through film. While the dialogue gets a bit tiresome at times, the film gets to the point and wraps up nicely in 92 minutes. 92 minutes! Just think about that for a second. The film tells a compelling and intimate story in just an hour and a half, while also featuring some really nice music and singing. Just like Joseph on Broadway, the constant singing works because it isn't too long. If Umbrellas was even 10 minutes longer, I could honestly say that it would feel too long and the singing would start to get tiring. Les Mis is a full hour longer than both of those musicals. And one more thing that really bugs me about Les Mis is the cinematography. Sure, it looks nice, and there are some nice sweeping shots, but man, is it claustrophobic. Yes, I get it, the filmmakers wanted an intimate experience with the characters, but instead I got an intimate experience with Hugh Jackman's ear. The camera is so close to the actors that it hurts my eyes and makes me wish they had backed up just a little bit. It really would make the film a lot more tolerable that way. Why do we need to be this close to the characters to feel close to them? Why not evoke some of that emotion from the performance and the songs? The Umbrellas of Cherbourg did that, and the camera hardly ever got that close, and never got anywhere near as close as Les Mis does. Let the music do the work for you. It is really good music. Whew. I guess all I can say about Tom Hooper's Les Mis is that it's a decent movie that probably shouldn't have been made. Sure, it has great performances from Hugh Jackman and Anne Hathaway, nice sets and costumes, and some powerful moments, but it takes so much just to sit through. Give it a watch if you really want to. I know I probably won't be revisiting this anytime soon. A generous 6 out of 10.
Valjean, at last, we see each other plain. Monsieur le Maire, you'll wear a different chain.
Before you say another word, Javert, before you chain me up like a slave again, listen to me. There is something I must do. This woman leaves behind a suffering child. There is none but me who can intercede. In mercy's name, 3 days are all I need.
The next nominee is a book adaptation. Before I say any more, I want to remind everyone that I try my best not to compare the original source to the film, as I want to review the film separately as, well, a film. There are times when drawing comparisons is appropriate, but I first want to see if it holds up as a film alone. I bring this up because the film in this case is Life of Pi. Directed by Ang Lee, this adaptation is something many of the fans of the novel have shown disappointment with. I personally have not read the book, so I really can't draw too many or any comparisons. The reason many of the novel's fans show their distaste is the way the film fails to connect the viewer like the book did. Already we have an issue. Books are a very private experience, and everything that is read is between the author and the individual reader. Everyone can read the same story, but only you can experience it and imagine it in your own way. When it's a film, it's a very public thing. Sure, the experience can be very different, but in the end, everyone sees the same thing. Even if your interpretation is vastly different from someone else's, you both physically saw the same thing. And people complaining that the film didn't grab you the same way the book did isn't a valid argument for the film itself. If you were discussing how good the adaptation is from book to film, then this is the perfect argument. Otherwise, the thing I'm looking for at this point is how well the film actually did and didn't connect to me. Again, I didn't read the book, so I don't know how it connects to the audience. As for the film, I did feel a bit of a connection. The story can be a bit fantastic at times, which I'll get to in a minute, but the spirit of the story is what grabs you. Most people enjoy a good survival story and tales of people overcoming the odds and the elements. I think what people complain about is how the idea of faith comes up short in the film. What I mean is that while the first act of the film does its darndest to put the idea of faith into the story, it doesn't have as much of a presence later in the film. Yes, there are scenes that Pi brings it up and all that, but every time he does, I'm reminded that all of that first act stuff even happened. And that's probably my biggest issue with the film, the first act. Similar to the book, yes, I did my research. The first part is about Pi's upbringing, which includes his encounters with 3 religions and how he got to be in his situation out at sea. The film starts awkwardly with a conversation between the author and adult Pi talking about the latter's life. The screenplay was really good for the rest of the film, but these first scenes feel completely different. It felt like a different screenwriter entered the room. And they get better as the film goes on, such as that final scene, but man, did it take a while for Life of Pi to get going. I checked. It's almost 40 minutes before we get to the main plot, and I feel some of that time could have been trimmed. Not too much, as it really does set up the character of Pi well, but again, 40 minutes. And these issues don't really compare to all the great things the film does. As you probably heard many times, it's a beautiful film. The cinematography won the Oscar, and it deserved it, with colorful shots of sea life that looked like paintings. My only question was why Ang Lee wanted to put aspect ratio changes in. Yeah, watch it again and you'll see the aspect ratio switch at 2 moments. One at the flying fish scenes, and the other one it shows a shot of Pi and Richard Parker lying on a boat in the sun. The score, another Oscar winner, serves the film well, and the special effects on the animals are still pretty incredible. On the negative side, I'm still a little shaky on the ending of the film. Not because it's ambiguous, but because of the execution of the scene. I understand what is happening now, but it really confused me the first time because it didn't feel like the film was trying to be ambiguous. It's not really an issue per se, but I did feel like the ending could have been a bit more open-ended than it was. Yeah, anyway, I highly recommend this film just for the visual aspects alone. A solid 8 out of 10. Can Daniel Day-Lewis ever give a bad performance? No matter what this guy does, he usually does more than a competent job in each role. When first approached by Steven Spielberg to portray Abraham Lincoln, Day-Lewis turned down the role in a semi-recently released letter. Obviously, Day-Lewis later accepted the role and went to work reading every book he could find about the 16th president. Spielberg's 2012 historical epic Lincoln was written by Tony Kushner and was originally a huge 500-page script about Lincoln's life story. Spielberg chose to focus on the ratifying of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, through the president's assassination and brief aftermath. Of course, Day-Lewis knocked it out of the park and won his third Best Actor Oscar following My Left Foot for 1989 and my pick for 2007, There Will Be Blood. The supporting cast is also great. Sally Field is great as the semi-psychotic Mary Todd, Tommy Lee Jones is a standout as Thaddeus Stevens, David Strathairn is solid as William Seward, Lee Pace is great as historically inaccurate Fernando Wood, and James Spader is hilarious as William Bilbo. Other big names that are sprinkled throughout are Adam Driver, David Oyelowo, Lucas Haas, Dane DeHaan, Michael Stuhlbarg, Walton Goggins, Hal Holbrook, Tim Blake Nelson, John Hawkes, and Jackie Earle Haley. Wow, what a cast. If you've noticed, I left one big name out. Playing Lincoln's eldest son, Robert, is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. While a good actor in many roles, here's where I felt Gordon-Levitt was miscast and a bit underwhelming. There's depth to this portrayal of the president's son, and while it's arguably not imperative to the narrative, say that 5 times, it's a nice perspective when looking at how young men felt pressured to serve. When these scenes happen, I don't groan, but there is a small sense of apathy for the situation, and the real emotion to Robert's enlistment comes from Sally Field in a totally different scene. The good thing is that Robert's story isn't looked into too much, but it did bog down the film. And that's another thing that hurts Lincoln, the running time. Not the specific running time, but the fact that it takes 2.5 hours to tell this story. I understand that Tony Kushner tends to pack a ton into his work, yet I felt they could have trimmed a lot out of the story. Also, not to be necessarily a spoiler, but after the 13th Amendment is ratified, there's a huge chunk of film left. I know what Kushner and Spielberg were doing, but once you present this climax and start the resolution, the audience starts to lose interest. And it just kept going and going until the ending everyone knows happens. One thing I did enjoy was how they presented Lincoln's assassination. This is such a big part of American history, and it's been interpreted in many different mediums, mainly all those historical documentaries about how Lincoln and his assailant John Wilkes Booth. Here, Spielberg chose to put the scene in a different theater where Lincoln's son Tad hears the horrible news. Because it happens off-screen, the audience has the opportunity to imagine what happened themselves, which would probably emulate what we've all seen in other films and documentaries about the assassination. But the biggest accomplishment outside of Day-Lewis's performance was the production design and cinematography. This is the most realistic looking film when it comes to Civil War era Washington, and the recreations of these locations are fantastic. Rick Carter and Jim Erickson won a well-deserved Oscar for their production design, and Janusz Kaminski clinched a nomination for his expert use of natural light in his camera work. Although there are things that weigh down the film, Spielberg's Lincoln is helped by an excellent cast and wonderful recreation of the period. 8 out of 10.
And whether any of you or anyone else knows it, I know I need this. This amendment is that cure. We're stepped out upon the world stage now. Now! with the fate of human dignity in our hands. Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment. Now! And you grousel and heckle and dodge about like pettifogging Tammany Hall hucksters. See what is before you.
Ah, yes, another David O. Russell film. Silver Linings Playbook stars Bradley Cooper, Robert De Niro, Jackie Weaver, and someone that most of you know I'm not too fond of, and that's Jennifer Lawrence. Back in the 2010 video, I talked about Winter's Bone, the film that technically put J-Law on the map because of her quote-unquote great performance. As I said in that video, I didn't think she was deserving of her Best Actress nomination and that she didn't give that great of a performance. If anything, she was one of the biggest things weighing the film down. Of course, part of the problem with that film is her character as well, something that stems from a simple, bland script. In the case for Silver Linings Playbook, J-Law is given a good character with good scenes and good dialogue. There is clearly a good writer behind this film, and it shows because of the amount of effort the entire cast puts into their respective roles. There is a lot of personality to this film, and I saw many of the actors disappear into their characters. The biggest problem, though, stemmed from two of the actors, J-Law and Chris Tucker. Before I say anything else, both of them did a decently good job. They did. While Tucker wasn't great, he held his own and actually had an interesting character, even if the character didn't add that much to the film. There's a certain shift in tone whenever he shows up, and I don't think it adds anything. There's one scene in particular that I got this goofy feeling from the movie, and it happened right when Tucker entered the scene. I guess the best way to summarize his role is that he broke the illusion the film was creating. Still, he did a fine job, and he wasn't in the film that much. But then there's Jennifer Lawrence. Yes, this is the big Oscar-winning performance from everyone's favorite young actress that everyone loves so very much. But I'll be honest, I didn't buy her in this film at all. Again, she did a good job. She was given a good character and was clearly trying. I just couldn't see the character. And that might come from other performances and her public appearances, but I try to make sure they don't affect the review in any way. I just think there's a prototype for a J-Law performance, and I think we've come to the point where she just doesn't have much more to offer. She's okay within the limits of her acting, but I don't think she has much of a range. Now, this is by far her best performance, but again, I think that's credit to the writer. There are times she just comes off awkward in the wrong way, something that stems from not blending with the film rather than a character trait. Everyone else was doing a great job in their roles, but whenever she was on screen, all I saw was Jennifer Lawrence. And this is totally a personal opinion of mine, but I don't think she's as great as everyone says. And did she deserve a nomination for this role? Yeah, I think it's worth being recognized. Winning the award, though, I don't think she was award-worthy. A good performance, but not the best of 2012. I think the only reason she won was because of her quote-unquote Oscar scene. For those who don't know, an Oscar scene is the one part of a film where someone starts yelling or going crazy, and this is usually the only time they do this. It then becomes an Oscar scene because it looks like they're trying to win an award, and also because it's the one scene shown at the ceremony when their name is announced before the award presentation. That diner scene in the first half is clearly J-Law's Oscar scene in this film, and while it does fit the character, it came off as forced. And that's probably the last big flaw with Silver Linings Playbook. It occasionally feels contrived. And it's not that big of a deal, but there were times when the drama felt forced and not natural, which a lot of the film did in fact feel natural. Overall, this is a good film. The story is interesting and unique, and the characters, as I've said too much now, are really good. There's great chemistry in the cast, and the movie shines with personality. And it's a feel-good movie by the end, which is funny when you look at the first half. I do like this movie and feel everyone should give it a chance, and I'm awarding David O. Russell's film an 8 out of 10.
Maybe I didn't spend enough time with you growing up. I spent too much time with your brother. It might have made you feel worse about your behavior, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to handle it. I mean, that's what all this Eagle stuff is about. It's about us spending time now. I want to do everything I can to help you get back on your feet. That's the whole point. Yeah.
Oh, Catherine Bigelow. Here we are again at the Oscars with your modern war film in the list of nominees. Unlike last time, there isn't a producer that tries to cheat your way to the top. And as I said for The Hurt Locker back in the 2009 video, this 2012 film is a well put together movie. Zero Dark 30 stars Jessica Chastain as Maya, a fictional CIA agent that helps lead the largest manhunt in history to find and terminate Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. Now this film knows how to pack a punch. The torture scenes are extremely uncomfortable, and appropriately so, and the payoff at the end of this journey is fairly satisfying. Chastain is good as the main character, but I didn't find her memorable. The reason I bring this up is because the filmmakers chose to have this fictional character to represent different women that help lead this hunt. You'd think with all the background and personality of the real people that this character would be better. And again, this isn't saying Chastain's character is bad, I just didn't feel that much of an emotional connection to her or the events happening. I remember when much of this took place, so I have that real-world connection to the story, but when we got to spend over 2.5 hours covering it, it really bogs it down. I understand the long running time does help make the audience feel the length of the story, but I think it may just be a bit too long. At the end of the day, this is a well-crafted film that knows how to keep you interested, but also has trouble connecting to the audience. But I will say the raid at the end of the film is the highlight and worth it. Give it a watch, for it is an important part of recent history. Just like The Hurt Locker, I'm giving Zero Dark 30 a 7 out of 10.
There's no working group coming to the rescue. There's nobody else hidden away on some other floor. There is just us. And we are failing. We're spending billions of dollars. People are dying. We are still no closer to defeating our enemy. They attacked us on land in '98, by sea in 2000, and from the air in 2001. They murdered 3,000 of our citizens in cold blood.
Well, let's recap the outstanding 9 nominees for tonight's Best Picture. AMOUR, ARGO, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Django Unchained, Les Miserables, Life of Pi, sorry. Lincoln. Silver Linings Playbook. Zero Dark 30. Obama, do you have your envelope?
Not yet, Jack, but I'm about to.
Good, all right.
And now for the moment we have all been waiting for. And the Oscar goes to ARGO. Congratulations.
For the first time since 1989, the Best Picture winner didn't have its director nominated. Driving Miss Daisy's own Bruce Beresford was left off the Academy ballot and remained the most recent director in this situation until 2012, when Ben Affleck was also absent from the category. I bring this up because I do believe Affleck's 2012 film ARGO won Best Picture because the actor was snubbed for Best Director. Now I think ARGO is a great film and a good choice for the 2012 big one. At the same time, I think Affleck not getting a directing nod was the thing that tipped the scale towards ARGO winning. 2012 is such a balanced year that I couldn't predict an easy winner in the weeks leading up to the ceremony. Truthfully, I could see Lincoln getting Spielberg his second Best Picture win, or Silver Linings Playbook sneak in for the win, or Life of Pi, which was my #1 guess going into that night. When ARGO was announced, I was sad, mainly because I was rooting for Lincoln to win. But upon looking at the situation with Best Director, I can see why ARGO won in the end. But that's not to take any credit away from a fine film that Affleck and company have made. The story, for those curious, is about the 1979 Iranian hostage crisis that saw the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and 52 U.S. citizens captured for 444 days. What many people didn't know was that 6 people snuck out the back door and took refuge in the Canadian embassy. Affleck plays Tony Mendez, a guy from the CIA that creates a disguise in a fake Hollywood movie to go to Tehran and get the 6 out. Whew, is this film tense. From the beginning, ARGO lays out the political turmoil in Iran and then jumps right into the day the embassy is taken. It's pretty scary to watch, and the rest of the film has this tense feeling that never goes away. Right up to the final minutes, the film keeps you on the edge of your seat and makes sure the ending is worth the wait. But the big question for ARGO is with how historically accurate it is. Now, with any film based off real events, there is going to be artistic license. Let's face it, a film that is 100% accurate and not a documentary is boring. There has to be a cinematic flow to the narrative, writing, and acting that makes it an entertaining movie. But then the film changes so much that it makes you question why it was changed. Spoilers for those who haven't seen it, I'm sorry. When Mendez and the 6 are boarding the plane, a bunch of Revolutionary Guards are running out to their vehicles and trying to stop the 747. According to the actual events, the 6 weren't discovered until long after they left Iran, meaning this change in the movie was for the sake of tension. This isn't a bad thing because adding tension is what you want if that's what your goal is. My issue with this edition is that it ends up as nothing. It doesn't really affect much outside the audience's reaction. Imagine they don't add that part with the cars and trucks on the runway. Is it still a tense ending? I think so, because it was pretty rough getting to the plane and having small things happen, like the bus almost stalling before getting to the plane. It still works, and I guess it all boils down to ARGO trying too hard to be a tense thriller. And it doesn't have to try that hard. Let the emotions and the atmosphere create the extra tension. Don't try to force it in. And this isn't too big of a problem because it is a well-crafted movie. The acting is good, the writing is pretty top-notch, and the story is really interesting. And the movie gets to the point. There are plenty of historical movies set in the 20th century that spend way too much time on filler and subplots and unnecessary character stuff. But ARGO doesn't do that. Sure, it can feel a bit rushed at times, but the film is on a timer, and it does its job of getting to the conclusion as the timer is set off. I applaud Ben Affleck and his team for creating a tense, entertaining, and historically relevant work of art. 8 out of 10.
Doesn't matter. It's a fake movie. If I'm doing a fake movie, it's going to be a fake hit.
Cardinal wants all cover options on his desk Friday morning.
Engel's prepping the bikes option, teacher's option. You have 72 hours
To make yours better.
Fine.
Well, this one wasn't too hard to figure out. Michelle Haneke's AMOUR is my pick for 2012 and the fourth member of the 10 out of 10 club for the 2010s. 2012 was quite the year, and I remember this being the first year I really paid attention to the Oscars. Unlike 2011, I did not agree with the Academy, although it was a tight race. Overall, 2012 was pretty good with an average score of 7.7, and the Oscar bait of the year goes to Les Mis. Did you really think otherwise? Some considerations for 2012 are Moonrise Kingdom, The Master, and I guess those two are it. Yep. Yeah, a tale of two Andersons for the considerations. So, yeah. Great job, 2012. You nominated a great bunch. This is the Jareeve signing off of The Best Picture Show for 2012. Again, my apologies for the lack of content. I'm trying. I hope you enjoyed this video, and a like and subscribe go a long way. Again, this is the Jareeve. Have a good one.
Valjean, at last, we see each other plain. Monsieur le Maire, you'll wear a different chain.
Before you say another word,
Chain.
before you chain me up like a slave again,
Chain.
there is something I must do.
Chain.
This woman leaves behind a suffering child. There is none but me who can intercede.